Communication is imparting or exchanging information by speaking, by writing, or using some other medium. I really believe that communication is the foundation of the world and in our homes. It's the foundation of every relationship, and it's important to learn to communicate well as we raise and as we release our children. Well, where does communication start? I really believe it starts from when your baby is in your womb, and it goes on throughout the rest of their lives as we parent them and as we raise them. We help establishing their identity through the way that we communicate. And we know that our identity is fundamental to who we are and how we view life and go into this world. So I'm going to start with identity before I get into the nitty-gritty of communication. Identity means that our children know who they are, and belonging means they know that where they can come to at the end of our day. Our identity determines where we belong, and it needs to be grounded on some foundation. Your personal identity is how you see yourself. It is shaped by early experiences in life, by our culture, the relationships we have, media, and through the narrative that we listen in our minds as well. So the things we think about. And so every single child and adult is faced with identity questions. It's part of life. And as you raise your children, they need to answer questions such as, who am I? Where do I fit into the world? Who do I belong to? And they will define themselves with the words that I am so-and-so. The problem is that many of us form our identity around what we do and not necessarily who we are. For example, I am an athlete. But what happens when you get injured and you can no longer compete? Or I am a mom. Well, what happens when your children leave home? And if your identity is so wrapped up in doing school runs and play dates and your children, you don't know who you are when they leave home. And so we need to teach our children to filter the voices around them and to listen to the correct voice that speaks identity over them. An identity of a child or you is also linked to the thought of being an image bearer. It's a close affinity or a likeness to something or someone else. And so where your children establish their identity or what they put their identity on will influence much of their lives. As a believer, I established my identity on Christ, and the scriptures speak about my life being hidden in Him, that I am a child of God. I am accepted. I am loved. Bam! Right there. That's my identity. We are loved. We are an image bearer of Christ on earth. There's a scripture that says that we have become His poetry, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny He has given each one of us, for we are joined to Christ, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it. That's from Ephesians 2 verse 10 in the Passion Translation. So we are God's masterpiece. Your children are God's masterpiece. And if you are parenting a world changer, it means that you need to help establish their identity. You need to help your children see themselves as God sees them. So one of the passages I would encourage you to think about is in Ephesians 1 verse 3 to 14. It speaks about us being blessed with every spiritual blessing, being chosen and adopted, forgiven. We have been given grace. We are unconditionally loved. We are pure and blameless. We have received the hope of spending eternity with God. And so all these things will establish our identity as a mom and dad, but we can help through good communication establish your children's identity on that as well. It is said that your identity, or your lack of it actually, is the core of most of your problems in life. If you struggle with rejection or any of those things, it's often linked to your identity. When we figure out who we are and how we are wired and we establish our identity well, then it gives us confidence, it settles issues in our hearts, and it helps us to become the man and woman that God intended us to become. And so through good communication, you can partner with the Lord to do that in your children's life. You can help them understand who they are and how they are wired and what they're meant to do in this world and who they are meant to be. But it doesn't come easily. Your children don't just understand things. We can't assume that they just know certain things. And so we have to be there to listen to them, to set boundaries, to love them, to ask questions, to communicate well. Remember, communication is about me sending you a message. So as you're watching this video, you're hearing certain words from me, you're interpreting it in your brain and you're understanding it. And then if we were in person, you would communicate something back to me. So that whole way of communicating and establishing their value is so fundamental to parenting and the way you raise your children, because when you communicate well and you accept them, you give them a place of belonging as well. We all need to belong somewhere. It's something that people crave. Think of all the clubs, sporting clubs, music clubs. People want to belong. They want to be part of a group, part of something bigger. And our children need a safe place to come home to. They need our homes to be a safe haven. And when they know they belong at home, then they can thrive. It gives them a foundation from where they can launch out into the world. And that comes through good communication, because the quality of family relationships is more important than our children's well-being, than the size of our family unit. So make an effort to enhance the quality of the relationship with your child. Figure out how you need to communicate with your child at the age that they're at. What do they need from you? Because every child is so different. My son and my daughter are very different, and in the way I communicate with them, I adapt to them. So one of them I would message more than the other. I would do more face-to-face. I mean, both need lots of face-to-face. Brene Brown reinforces this by saying that a deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. And when those needs are not met, we don't function as we're meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we get hurt, we get sick. And so now you might be wondering, well, Mandy, you're carrying on about this, and this is the section on communication, but identity and belonging are all linked to communication. The way we make our children feel through our verbal communication, our non-verbal communication. And so we model building warm and trusting relationships in our family through the way that we speak to our kids, the way we interact with them, the way we take time to play with them in an undistracted way. I love watching my husband Neil play with our teens. The one day he was swimming with them in the pool, and he was so focused on making short family underwater films that nothing else really mattered. And over the years, I've seen him walking around with our toddlers clinging onto his legs. He was pretending to be a rock giant. And he had these focused, intentional times with our children, helping them feel valued and laughing and making them feel like they belong, because they do belong. And so when we help our children understand their identity, we create a place where they can belong, and we celebrate being family, then it gives them such a great foundation to thrive, and we teach them how to communicate well. It's all undergirded by communication. There's a quote that says, to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world, and use this understanding as a guide to our communication with others. That's Tony Robbins who said that. So when we communicate, we all see the world, like he said, from a different perspective. And when we put ourselves in our children's shoes and we understand what they're facing, the digital world challenges they're facing, it shapes how we communicate to our kids. And we teach them how to ask good questions. We teach them how to think, how to listen. And that comes from us being able to do the same. You might have heard me say once that I heard a rabbi say the way to wisdom is learning to ask a good question. And to raise confident children, we need to teach them to ask good questions. There's a technique of asking 360-degree question asking. So you ask questions from all different angles. But in terms of communication, how do we communicate well with our kids? Well, first of all, you listen attentively. Secondly, take a mental break before you speak. Just practice the art of the pause. Thirdly, you don't interrupt the other person. You can teach your children these basic principles. Let them listen to other people all the way through. And fourthly, as parents, I don't know about you, I struggle with this sometimes, is to keep on track, keep focused instead of going through all different rabbit holes. And fifth, use the right communication method. Think about how you need to communicate to your kids in what way. And sixth, keep an eternal perspective in mind. Think about what's going to happen for eternity. I'd like to transition a little bit and speak about how to expose the heart of your child through what's going on. This is a form of question asking to figure out how to know what's going on in your children's life. A mom who was on one of my previous parenting courses used this form of asking these questions to help her figure out why her child was lying. She came back to the lesson the next week full of smiles, saying it actually worked. So I'm going to be giving you an example of a teen who was caught drinking at an underage drinking. And so remember, you can adapt the questions to your children's age and stage, but you need to follow the order. And it is going to be in your notes, so you could print it out and think it through. But the first thing is to find out what's going on. So you would ask your child, hey, what's going on, or what happened? So she could say, I went to Ella's house for a party. So you get all the information. Second question is, what were you thinking or feeling as it happened? So then your child would say, well, I was feeling a little bit uncertain or scared, and I didn't know what was going on, and someone just handed me a glass. I wasn't sure what was in it, but I was too embarrassed to ask. So you're still gathering some more information. Third, you ask, what did you do in response? And so now, this being the example of your child being caught drinking at a party, then she could say, well, I took the glass and I started drinking it, and then I realized it was alcohol, but I just drank it anyway, and I didn't know what else to do. So she took the glass and she drank it. You know, that's the information there. Fourthly, why did you do it? So your teen could say, well, I actually wanted to fit in, or I was too embarrassed. I thought that other girls would laugh at me if I said no or put it aside. So now you're starting to uncover the deeper parts of her heart and what's really going on. And then you could ask, well, what were you seeking to accomplish? Again, you can change the words to adapt to your child, but that's the heart of the question. What were you seeking to accomplish? The teen could figure out, oh, I actually wanted to be accepted. I wanted to feel like I fit in, and so I didn't want to rock the boat. And sixth is, what is the result? Well, the teen, she could say to you, well, I broke the rules. And then you could have a conversation around the consequences from there. So use these questions to unlock what's going on in your child's heart. Remember, the good communication is fundamental to the success of any relationship. So grow your skill in learning to ask good questions, to communicate well with your children, and watch those relationships thrive. Remember, all of it is on the foundation of love. And so when you communicate with your children, whether you're disciplining them, whether you're encouraging them, whether you are urging them on, whatever it is, make sure it's done from a heart of love, from a heart of empathy, and with loads of humor. Remember, a smile goes a long way. But I'm rooting for you as you learn to grow your communication skill, and as you learn to develop ways of building the relationships with your children that will cause it to thrive for years to come.